Welcome to Cypher After Hours. This is the second half of our interview with remote viewer Daz Smith.
So I really want to ask you about the Hellfire Club. So for our listeners, anybody who isn't aware of what the Hellfire Club is, it's a invite-only group of talented remote viewers who only work on weird and wonderful, wacky mysteries topics, doing the even more far-out stuff than we do, I think. So how many projects have you done so far on Hellfire?
Oh, yeah, Hellfire. Okay, so just as an overview, I set up the Hellfire group probably about 2 years ago now, I think. So I just started recruiting and curating people that I found online that I felt had a talent for remote viewing, trying to use their services. And essentially, there's always been a thing within remote viewing that remote viewing shouldn't be and can't really be used to look at mystery stuff because, there's not much feedback for it. And I'm one of these people that if you tell me I shouldn't be doing something, then that's the kind of thing that I want to do. So
Same way.
Yeah. And you'd get like our official kind of leaders in remote viewing saying, "Oh, you shouldn't be using remote viewing for that." So the moment they start saying that was the impetus for me to say, right, that's what I'm going to do. Especially when they were taking, because Courtney Brown and Farside has taken a lot of flack for probably the last 15, 20 years for doing a lot of projects along those lines. And I saw the flat they were getting, and I thought, that's the things that people want to know about. They don't want to know about us remote viewing the Eiffel Tower or the London Bridge, because it's just boring. It really is boring. They want to know about the spice of life things that we all encounter in our woo-woo hours. That was my impetus behind it, was almost like sticking a finger up to certain people out there and saying, this is what I'm doing, whether you like it or not. And it's going well. I think we've done probably about 7 or 8 targets at the moment, ranging from the Tic Tac UAP to, Skinwalker Ranch UFOs. And we're just finishing one right now, which I haven't given feedback on. But the one I'm doing right now, I wouldn't even class that as esoteric. It's a bit of a mystery, but I think it's got a real world cause to it. Would be a great one to discuss.
If it's really a cool topic to discuss, I'd love to hear about it. Yeah.
It's a very cool one. So the target I set them, and they don't know this, but they'll know it by the time they hear this, was the collective cause for the Havana effect that was happening in America.
Havana syndrome, right? They call it
Havana syndrome, yeah.
Was this the U.S. Embassy in Havana? And then all the people were getting embassies. They were getting all sorts of brain issues and things like that?
Yes. So, I sent them to look at what was actually causing that. And I think we had 7 viewers worked it. And I'll be putting the data out probably within a few weeks because I'm going to tell them tomorrow what the target is. And literally across the board, all the data is detailed around about sound and waves. And it looks like a satellite system. And it does mirror what the American government put out on what they believe it is, which is some kind of microwave radiation type thing going on. Very interesting data. There was some really strange data in there, though, that across the board, there's quite a lot of data that seems to indicate something about some kind of underground facility, maybe underwater facility, which threw me a spanner. I have to be honest on that. And one of the viewers even detailed something like a psychic hooked up to an amplifier that would do mind stuff. And that threw me a spanner as well, because I had no preconceived ideas. So to see that, I was like, and it was only one viewer that said it though, but at the same time, you can't discount it. And it's like, whoa, what's happening with that? That's an interesting angle.
So we have the men who stare at goats type of a source, potentially. Something to that effect.
But now they're in space.
Yeah, the worrying thing about doing this, of course, and I didn't think about this when I naively set the target, is that if the feedback's correct, as the American government believes, and they're blaming the Russians, I've just sent these remote viewers on this target, which is like disclosing possibly some of the Russians' most secret technology. And I didn't think about that at the time. But I think we'll still put it out there anyway, because we like to live on the edge. But if we all have heart attacks in the next 6 months, then
don't go anywhere near balconies.
Yes. It has that kind of feeling about it. To be honest, this project may not even reach public domain. I'll have to get a vote off everyone to see if they actually want to put their data out there, because I honestly didn't realize the implications of what we're doing. Because, I set the target, then I did loads of research as they were doing the target, and the more research I found, the more research was indicating from the American government that it was the Russians using mind control weapons. And I was like, whoa, what have I started, kind of thing.
So, Daz, you probably are aware of the episode we did on Skinwalker Ranch, and you mentioned that you had done some work with Hellfire Group on Skinwalker Ranch. How does that relate to what we did, and are you able to share any of that with our audience?
Yeah, our stuff was very similar. I set a very tight target with crypto viewing. It wasn't through Hellfire, it was through, well, we've done it twice actually. I've done it once through crypto viewing, and that was an event in series 1 of the Skinwalker Ranch program, where they filmed a UFO and it was hovering above a cow that was in distress and dying. And I targeted that event to the second of what was in the sky and what it was doing with the cow below. So we did that one through crypto viewing, and they got some amazing data. And if your guys feel inclined on this, it is up on our YouTube channel for free now. I made it live a week ago, so they can look at that. And through Hellfire, Dimmy set us a target. So she was the project manager, and I was actually a viewer on the project, where she asked us to look at what was called the hitchhiker effect, which is a paranormal effect that happened, or it started off in the Skinwalker Ranch, but then ends up following the people that had the effect home, and then it gets transmitted to their family and then their family friends, so it has a virability about it. So we looked at that and the origin of where that effect came from as well. I don't know too much about the other viewers, but my kind of details, I don't like to use the word ET based, but non-human entity based, I would say.
My session work on this was straight up science fiction is the way it came across to me. I was dealing with time travel and extraterrestrials from a different, I don't know if it's reality or what. And then there's this thing inside the hillside that has an awareness to it. And it was just, this was probably one of the more wild remote viewing sessions I've had in recent years, to be honest, when I got pointed at Skinwalker Ranch. You said that you got, it seemed ET related, but are there any kind of details that they sussed out that were interesting that people might want to know that was in the remote viewing work?
I don't like to talk about what the others got because it's hard for me to talk about what other people experience. I only like to go with what I got within my session, and mine was mainly ET, time travel, portal, all kind of really strange based stuff. Very high tech, but ours was based on the hitchhiker effect that affected a single person from a series of books, and he is like an official government intel person, and he's been given the pseudonym Axelrod. So it was the events that and the hitchhiker effect in relation to him and his family. He had detrimental bodily and psychological effects, real physical effects from all this, which has been recorded in the books as well. His wife ended up with cancer and all kinds of stuff from the paranormal effects that they had. I detailed all that kind of detrimental effects to all the organs of his body in the session. I don't know if he knows this or not, that he might have had some kind of abduction type experiences or scenario as well related to that.
Well, you've probably watched, or at least some of the show that has aired on television. Where do you land with all this stuff now? You've seen other people's remote viewing work. You've done your own. I'm sure you've heard the details of ours to some extent. Where do you land now on what's going on there and what that show's about too?
It's strange because I've watched all 3 series, and I was concerned, especially in series 1, because you look at them doing these science experiments and you're like, are they real scientists? It doesn't look that professional to me. If I was there, I'd have cameras everywhere and have infrared, all sorts. So that did concern me. But recently we found out that the guy, Travis, the science guy that's on call there, he was actually the lead for the government UAP project as well. And it's like, whoa, this guy really does have credentials. We have to bear in mind it's a TV program. I've had a fair few TV companies now come video me doing remote viewing and stuff. A lot of what they get you to do is there for theatrical use only. It's not real world stuff. So there's probably a lot of that going on in the TV program. But at the same time, there's a lot going on there. And I don't know if you guys know this, but there's another ranch virtually next door. And I've been talking to a guy that I've known for a while, just this last couple of weeks. And he sent me some photographs literally 2 days ago of Jacques Vallée and How Put Off and a few others walking around this other ranch 10 years ago in the same area, which is going through the exact same stuff as what's happening at Skinwalker now. Maybe even more intense and more important. there's multiple places where this very strange stuff's going on, and we got the world's top science experts looking into it. So there is definitely something going on, but I don't think they even know what's going on. And we have to remember as well, Bigelow kept everything secret, so we don't even know what he found there.
Bigelow was a big investor in remote viewing too. So that's even the other weird coincidence that's going on here as well.
I just want to ask, Daz, that other ranch, was that to the south of Skinwalker?
I don't know the location. I've got the name though. I think it might be called the Wilson Ranch, maybe, or something. I'd have to open up Facebook to have a look.
Because the Angela Thompson Smith was advertising for free remote viewers to not get paid for their work. And we looked up the address of the business, and they were like next door to Skinwalker, but it was like across the valley to the south was the business address. So I'm just thinking, is that on Skinwalker, or is that the adjacent one?
It's called Mount Wilson. And this guy's, he's wanting me to do a project on this new ranch because he's claiming that, a bit like Area 51, that the Skinwalker Ranch is a distraction whilst all the other stuff, all the big stuff's happening at the other ranch.
I think I'd love to hear more about some of the other projects that Hellfire has done, if you'd be willing to go over some of them with us. What are some of the other ones that you've done? I know you've done Roswell, Tic Tac. What are some of your other favorites so far that you've run?
Yeah, we've just done one. We've just finished and put up. I have to be honest, I haven't seen everyone's data on it yet, but that was a plane that went missing over the Bermuda Triangle. My data was all about some kind of very strange pyramid that was emitting energy. My whole sessions were just about this huge big pyramid structure that was shooting up energy into the sky. And so I was looking at it going, oh, I don't know, I must have been off target and stuff. And then I did some research, and then it was like all this research kept coming to me about pyramids found underneath Bermuda Triangle, and I was like, no, did I just feed back myself, or is it real? Again, it's one of those, I have to be honest, I don't know an awful lot on the Bermuda Triangle. I know a little bit about it, and I've read a couple of books, but it's not on my radar. So it was interesting to see that data. I still don't know how I feel about it, to be honest, other than it's probably a place just like the Skinwalker and the Wilson Ranch. It's probably one of those esoteric places that we have on planet Earth. It's just one of those weird places where things happen. Going back decades, if you read the UAP literature as well, there are some great books talking about not unidentified flying objects, but unidentified undersea objects as well. And a lot of that comes from the vicinity there. And, you know, what better place to hide a facility on planet Earth, which is like a huge percent water, than to hide it under the sea?
A long time ago, I was given the task blind. It was a anomalous sound.
Is it the bloop, I think?
The bloop. That was it.
Yeah,
It was the bloop. Yeah. And I wish I remember the exact details of the actual remote viewing work, because it was so long ago, but there's a lot of really strange things that definitely are associated with the ocean and UAPs. Well, you're kind of an expert in the whole UAP phenomenon. How did you get into that?
I got into UAP research in 1989, actually, when the crop circles happened. I was like, what? You know, because it was literally on my doorstep. It was like, what is going on with this? So I then became addicted in UAP research. It was called UFO research back then. And like with remote viewing, when I get interested in something, I like get hardcore with it. And probably from 89 to today, but I was hardcore from 89 to 2005. And I made it my goal at the time to collect everything. And at one point, I had a vast library of VHS videotapes. I had every publicly available piece of UFO video film from 1947 to 2005. Hundreds and hundreds of them in a library, and books as well. I still got some of the books. Probably about 12 months ago, I gave 300 of the books free away to someone. But I probably kept about 50, 60 of the first edition rare 1940s and 50s UFO books that I got. So yeah, I've been addicted to UAP research as well. But I got to a level in 2005 where it's real, something's happening. I have not seen many live stuff other than little lights in the sky, but I've seen so much stuff on video, and I had so many freedom of information documents at the time. I had tens of thousands of those as well. It's like, where'd you go from here? It's not, unless someone discloses something or shows you something at some point, it's not going anywhere. So that's why I stopped doing all the hardcore research into that, and I moved more into remote viewing. I've done remote viewing sessions for Tom DeLonge and the Reach for the Stars people, which I know has been passed on to people like How Put Off and people like that. So I keeping my fingers in there, and I'm also in a couple of not secret, but I'm in a couple of closed UAP discussion groups that only got people making the documentaries, and again, How Put Off and all those kind of people in there as well. So I'm keeping my fingers in there, but again, it's knowing where it's going. At the moment, well, a year ago, I would have said that disclosure's coming. Now it feels like it's flip-flopped, and it feels like there is literally a war going on in American intel and government, where there's one set of people that want disclosure, and there's another set of people that want to keep the secrets. So it's just a case of who's going to win, and I would say it's probably going to be the secret keepers, unless they can pass this law, which they're trying to pass. They're trying to pass a law which allows anyone that's had any kind of UAP government work, and where they've worked in government circles, that they will be allowed to have whistleblower status and not be penalised for it in any way. If that gets passed, it may turn the tables, but at the moment we're seeing a flip-flop, and we're seeing lots of negativity stuff coming out. We're getting people now say, oh no, the Tic Tac UFOs and the others, they were probably just drones, Chinese drones. So I think it's flipping again right now.
Do you think, just like with the crop circle phenomenon, there's more than one thing going on? Because everyone's got these theories, oh, I know UFOs are this or UFOs are that, but it seems to me like there's multiple phenomenon.
And I say this as well to people, from my normal research, reading books and documents and all that kind of stuff, and my RV side of it as well, it's clearly showed me that I can't call them ETs. For several reasons. The phenomenon's been here longer than we have as humans, because it tracks our human history back for every aspect. Even say that key events that happen in the Bible might be UAP kind of related type events. So they've been here just as long as we have, maybe even longer. And a lot of the evidence that I'm seeing, especially in the hardcore stuff in documents that you read and you hear what people testimonies talk about, and also in the remote viewing stuff, it indicates to me that it's not ET. It's almost like it's some kind of non-physical, interdimensional type thing going on. Or maybe it's a bit of both. Maybe there is some ET, there is some interdimensional, maybe there's even some people or things from the future coming back to the past, but it could be all of that lumped in together, and we're just misidentifying, because to us it just looks like magic.
I'm sure a lot of people would love to know your answer to the question, why? What's the why behind UFOs? And maybe you don't know, but you must have thought about it or postulated, or what's the big why to it all? If they've been here forever, and you're someone to ask that because you've looked at so much of the literature, you've done the remote viewing data, it is a guess, because you know, it's until it's all out in the public and we know the hard facts, it's still going to be a guess. But where do you land on the why behind all of this, the big picture stuff? I'm really curious.
Yeah, that's a great question. And not a lot of people ask that. They get caught up in the small stuff. Again, I can't prove any of this, but it seems people are starting to talk about it now, and I think we're going to hear a lot more about it in the next 5 to 10 years. I think the connection in all of it is human consciousness. And I can't work out yet whether... And I think it might be a scale, it might be a bit of both. It almost feels like they created human consciousness to a certain degree, but at the same time, they're shocked at what human consciousness can do. I think there's a duality of things going on. I think some of them maybe created us and our human consciousness experience, and that's why we're so young in it. But some of them at the same time are like, whoa, these guys don't know what they've actually got that we haven't got.
Do you think they're scared?
Again, I think there's a spectrum. I think there are some of them that are scared because we don't know what we have. It's almost like someone's given us a technology or something that we just do not know the capabilities of it. And one day when we will, it's going to really change our position in the universe. So I think there are some of them that are actually worried and scared about that. And some of them may be even trying to make that worse for us, make us worse along those kind of lines, because we are a threat to them. And there are others out there, of course, that are the ones that are trying to get this thing to work. Yeah, that's what I mean. It's very complicated. It's like a big spectrum of everything going on at once. Because when I've looked at some of the craft with remote viewing, the craft aren't being, and I say craft loosely because they're not always physical, they're not being driven by controls. They're being driven by a symbiotic kind of relationship. And the craft are just as alive in an AI kind of weird way as the life forms are that are driving the craft. Very strange.
So one of your Hellfire projects, I think, was the microchip technology recovered from Roswell. Did I get that right?
Yeah. It was as reported by Colonel Corso in his book Day After Roswell, yes.
And did what you found there support any of your hypotheses about the phenomenon more broadly?
Yeah, it did. I mean, that's where I'm getting this kind of like worldview read. I think it's come over the last 3 or 4 years for me from doing these different projects. And maybe that's not, we say there are no coincidences. I think all these things for me are they're building me a picture of something out there that's happening in the universe that it's almost, I hate to use the word godlike. It's not God in the traditional sense of how we think of a godlike thing. I think all these separate projects like the Area 51 stuff I've done, the stuff I've done for Tom DeLonge and a few of the others, they're all building this picture for me on different levels. The whole thing that seems to be amazing in this whole universe is consciousness. It's almost like every object, everything has an element of consciousness at some level.
I think even though our podcast is in its infancy, I'm noticing as a tasker and as the project manager, there's a lot of coincidences even in the shows we've done so far and how they all fit together with each other in really unexpected and odd ways. It's almost like I have a plan where I want to take the show, but it's not my plan really. It's more almost, I call it a download. It's like I get this intuition on where things need to go. Even unbeknownst to me at the time I set the tasking, they tend to work out in really bizarrely good ways. So I almost feel like there's some non-physical guidance helping us along.
Yeah. We said this a couple of weeks ago in our Satoshi Nakamoto show, didn't we? That people don't have ideas, ideas have people. I wonder what ideas are having us.
Yeah. Well, there's an interesting corollary between the name, the Hellfire group, which, I mean, I'm a fan of the show, but Stranger Things, I'm pretty sure, has the Hellfire group in it. And they even have this remote viewer, quote unquote, who's kind of going into their mind and seeing things at a distance and reporting back. And what do you know? This remote viewer is someone who is viewed as a threat to the government agencies, and they're trying to stop her or use her. The scientists are trying to piggyback on her power. There's a funny story, isn't there? Didn't you come up with Hellfire first, the name?
Yeah, we did in its modern use, but Hellfire Club was like an 18th century group of young gentlemen that used to meet in the UK, and they used to talk about science and debauchery and all kinds of things that they used to get up to in those kind of gentleman clubs. So I stole the name from that, but we did set up the remote viewing side of Hellfire Club a couple of years ago, a couple of years before Stranger Things started delving into it. Either there's some kind of synchronicity there, or maybe they were doing research on the internet and they just popped across us in some regard and used us in some way. And I said to people, I don't believe in coincidences, things always seem to happen for a reason. Yeah.
Have you watched the show at all, Stranger Things?
I have, yeah. I've watched them all, yeah.
What's your take on it, their depiction of what the main character is doing in that show?
It's interesting. I think that what they've done, I think their story is very massively, heavily influenced by the alleged mythology around Project Montauk and all that kind of stuff. There's no way to verify any of that. I've tried. And, the Philadelphia experiment and all that kind of strange stuff. So I think they have some really good mythology in there.
What is your understanding of the Montauk and the Philadelphia, for those that don't know?
There's Montauk Island. And allegedly there, I can't remember the years it happened, but I think it was like 60s and 70s. There's a big radar tower there, and apparently an underground facility there on the island, where they alleged that all kinds of very strange mind control, time travel type experiments went on that were linked to the Philadelphia experiment. It's very complex how they kind of interweave all these stories. They make all these claims like children were stolen or kidnapped, psychic children, and they were taken there and they were turned into almost like psychic kind of traveling spy type people that would move forward and backwards through time. I don't know about any of it. I mean, obviously the island's there, the base and the facilities there, so you can see the radar tower. I've actually seen video film underground, so there is an underground facility of sorts there. I don't know how much I believe on the rest of it, to be honest.
There is a counter theory that Montauk is in fact a fabricated psyop, which I find more plausible.
I think you'll find that most stuff out there is forced disinformation. We know this from a fact because some of the disinformation agents actually admitted to doing it on behalf of the government.
Yeah, it seems like the best way to hide the truth is you mix it in with a bunch of lies so people can't sort it out. Basically, muddy the waters so much that you can't actually discern what's going on.
And that's what's happened in UAPs. If you get hardcore into UAP research, since the 80s, it's been so filled with disinformation that they've confused it so much that no one knows what the true story is anymore or where to go with it. It's very clever. It's divide and conquer kind of thing. Some of us have a theory that that's actually happened within remote viewing as well. And there were one or two people that went public with what they did, and they made so many predictions along certain lines that it took remote viewing in the public perception along a route that was what they intended and not what it really is.
I admit it. I get paid by the CIA. Don't tell anyone. It's after hours.
Brett, you're not supposed to say that on air.
Don't worry, Brett isn't his real name.
It would be nice if they did pay.
I'm still waiting for that. They tell me it's coming.
I said this before. If the CIA or someone said, would you remote view for us for $1 million, would you do it?
Oh, man. For $1 million?
What about 10 million? Yeah.
That brings up a good topic here, which is Pat Price, because Pat Price was the really, really famous naturally gifted psychic who worked with the Stanford Research Institute, was alongside Ingo Swann, worked with Hal Puthoff, and he just died mysteriously.
He died suddenly of a pre-existing heart condition, having predicted his own death, I believe.
Yeah, he did take out was it $2 million life insurance weeks before he died, and it literally he left SRI to work for the CIA, who poached him, and then within a few days of him working for the CIA, he died. A bit like when the CIA moved the remote viewing program from SRI to the CIA, and then the remote viewing program died. It's very similar to that.
Yeah, and so I suppose whenever asked that question, if someone paid you $1 million to work for one of these super secretive intel agencies, the only thing I would recommend they become aware of is the history of those who have already done so.
It would be an interesting dilemma to have.
Yeah.
To be offered that amount of money. I guess for what, though, as well?
It depends, right? Yeah, it depends on probably the what for. And you'd probably have to make the decision then, like national security, betterment of society.
I think I could do it as long as I was never given any feedback, because if they never gave me feedback, I couldn't know anything, right? I wouldn't be a threat. I wouldn't know what I'd described.
While we're on the topic of CIA, Daz, I know that you've done a lot of research on the declassified CIA archives. Is there any really juicy stuff that you've uncovered that you want to share with our listeners?
There is stuff in the Stargate files that isn't really discussed much within remote viewing circles. There's a lot of information about researchers and their interactions. The documents as the CIA have them in a terrible state of affairs. They're in no order. In fact, you can almost absolutely say that they almost took all 110,000 pages of information, just chucked them all up in the air, see where they landed, and then just scanned them in and said, here you are. They were trying to stop people from looking at them. But if you look at them enough, you can see patterns, and you can see that none of it was a happy camper situation that was going on. There were lots of definite divisions. There were some researchers high up on the circuit that were sacked for improprieties. Even people that we all know and love, people like Ingo Swann, who was absolutely amazing what he did. We have to be honest in that when you look at the records, he was prone to the occasional once or twice a week tantrum. So you said anything to him or discounted his work in any way, he would like, right, that's it, I'm leaving. And then 2 days later, he would be back again. So there's all these kind of things that go on like they do in everyday life. Yeah, so there's lots of that kind of stuff. And there are just normal stuff in there as well. Like one of the biggest methods within remote viewing is CRV, or controlled remote viewing. Again, it was made by Ingo Swann and Hal Puthoff. And it's touted as being pretty much indestructible and the best and everything else. But I have to be honest, even though I know it works, if you look at the hardcore records, there's quite a lot of scientific data that kind of goes against how it was created and how it's structured by Ingo and it working as well.
What would you say to the person who will look at this and say, "Oh no, that's all nonsense. It's fake. These aren't real people." Do you have anything to say to those individuals?
Yeah, I would say seriously read the documents, and not the ones that the CIA put out, but Dr. Ed May revised the documents into a 4-volume set. They're called the Stargate Archives. He and his researchers went out of their way that when the remote viewers did targets, they weren't given feedback a lot of the time, but he and his people went out and actually found that feedback and put it in the chronological order as well, so you can actually see all the results and stuff. So the data in those books, I would say, you literally cannot dispute, because you're talking millions of experiments in over something like a 42-year period history that absolutely proves that there is an effect. It's not a big effect, but in most cases, but there is definitely some kind of anomalous effect that's going on.
Yeah, one of the things that I've heard is that, and I think this was from Hal Puthoff, is that they were constantly on the chopping block. They had to keep showing every time they came around to continue their funding that something is really going on here, or else you're going to lose your funding, at least from the early days. And I know one of the questions that I hear all the time, and I'm always curious to get different remote viewers' opinions on it, but it's one that's also asked of about almost every remote viewer, which is, what are your thoughts on whether or not the program still exists in some form or some capacity? They supposedly got rid of it because it didn't work, right, was the official reason. Or maybe it's too politically hot, is what I've heard from other individuals who are part of the program. You can't say we're funding psychic research. You'll lose your job. But like, where do you land on this? Do you think it's just gone dark and they're still using it and they have the next generation of RV that we don't even know? Or do you really think that, nope, that was it and they got better things to do?
Well, that's a good question. And I've changed on this over the last year. I looked at all the files. I asked everyone out there, is there a program going on? And I couldn't find anything whatsoever to indicate that there was. Other than we did have some kind of hints that in interviews that Ingo Swan gave, that he did train what he called was a secret group of remote viewers that were like Intel type based, and then they disappeared and he never heard from them again. So I did face to face. I did ask him if that happened, and I tell this story. He literally just sat across from me with his cigar hanging out his mouth, and he said, "There are some things that I signed security oaths on that I can't discuss," with a huge grin on his face. So I think that kind of gave me the answer that I was looking for there. And then more recently, probably about the last year now, I started hearing from someone who was high up in the official Stargate unit that there was some kind of work going on. So then I got the chance to ask another person who was very high up in the Stargate program at one point that very same question: is there anything continuing to this day? And that person confirmed to me as well. So I've had two of the most top people that I could imagine confirming that there is. So I have to conclude that there probably is something going on now, but I would say it's probably like the UAP research in that it's not done at a level that can be tracked. It's done subcontracted to some company through some kind of black project somewhere. And it's probably not even called remote viewing or something. It's probably called something like tactical analysis, situational awareness, or something or other.
Don't they call it clear thinking or sense making or something? I think they've wrapped it up under sense making.
Yeah, imagine if you had unlimited funding to be able to explore the extent and power of RV at your fingertips, what you could do. I can't even fathom it.
If I had an unlimited budget, I would mix remote viewing with AR and VR and AI all at the same time.
Don't forget the brain-computer interface as well.
That's where I would go with it. Yeah.
I think it's interesting that a lot of the people that were in the military program that did the remote viewing, whenever they're asked the question, do you think there's still a remote viewing program going on in intelligence agencies? All of them, as far as I'm aware of, say hard no. They come up with an excuse like, well, I have all the research here in my office and therefore they should have come looking for it. But I think your explanation about when you were spending the day with Ingo, and he's like, well, I may have been working with more than one party, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, that there's no reason for them to look at SRI's research in that instance. They probably started their whole other branch completely independent back then. So why would they need someone else's work?
Going back to your initial training with was it Lee Culver, his name? Who trained him, right? So I think we don't know. He wasn't a Stargate guy. So there's another lineage out there somewhere.
He's not in any of the documents, and he wouldn't tell me either. And he wouldn't tell me his credentials, but you can kind of tell by how these people, special forces type people, and how they're trained, how they conduct themselves, how they have a certain way of when they enter a room or when they move. There's something about them, their situational awareness and the way of confidence that normal people don't have. So he had all that about him. I've seen records of him doing special forces training and tracking and all kinds of medical stuff like that. So I do know he had credentials. It's just that he won't tell me about him. He never did. And I have to be honest, I haven't really spoken to him in 20 years, but I can never get out of him where he trained or how he learned CRV, because when he taught me, it wasn't public. No one had the manual other than the military guys. I have, in my dark hours, sometimes laid in bed and thought, could he have been one of Ingo's trainees? Could he have been one of those people? Where did he get his stuff from?
Yeah, or one step away.
One step away, yeah. We just do not know. And I was in the same camp. I was like thinking, if there was a program, then why is Ed May? Why is Joe McMonigan? Why are they all on the outside? Why aren't they in the program? Because they all say no. But as I said, the last literally year, I've had confirmation from two top people. And one of them, I can't say his name because he told me, if he told me, I wasn't allowed to say in public. But I totally trust his opinion and stuff. And I've interviewed him in the past as well. So I have to go with what they say. And they indicate that there is a secret program going on.
Those guys who say a hard no, definitely not, couldn't, impossible, definitely isn't happening. Those same people, some of them, I think, say you can't remote view numbers. It's impossible. You absolutely can, right? So, I mean, what other porcupines are they telling?
And that was one of the things that I, just like you said, Daz, it's like everything they tell you can't do. I'm just like, oh, I can't do numbers? Well, I'm going to make it my mission to do numbers.
Absolutely, yeah. I think that's a good philosophy for life, that is, yeah. I can't prove it, but it just seems to be that there were certain people that have been prominent within the field and still are prominent within the field that seem to have an agenda that isn't natural. It seems to be a forced agenda with on behalf of someone else.
So, Daz, in your opinion, what is missing from those CIA leaked documents from the archives? Obviously, they're not going to tell us everything. What should be there that isn't there in your mind? What is the information that is withheld?
That's a really good question. I think there's two sets of documents I'll go through right now. So there's the Stargate stuff, which is the CIA files. But more recently, over the last couple of years, the estate of Ingo Swann have also released Ingo's archives as well. And I've noticed myself, because, I had several years of communication with Ingo by letters and stuff. And I've noticed there's a big chunk of several years of information in Ingo Swann's archives that is missing. So that's one thing. In the main Stargate archives, I found probably 5 or 6 documents that indicate, and they use the term RA, which is remote action. A lot of people talk about remote influencing in remote viewing. But it was never called remote influencing. It was always called RA, or remote action. I've got 5 or 6 documents that indicate experiments in affecting people and things with human subconsciousness. And one of them is a document that goes through several levels of what they did to train people in this. But I've never found any other documents to support it. So, although I can't prove it, I think that there's a huge amount of remote action documentation that's been annexed in some way, and that they did loads of work on influencing people's minds, brains, bodies, and normal things as well, like components of circuit boards, all that kind of stuff. But mainly I think they were more interested in affecting humans with that. But I can't prove it because I've seen these tantalizing glimpses. I've asked around and no one will comment on them. I think there's a lot of that missing.
It makes sense if there is an actual effect. That would be one of the things they're most interested in. If they can actually affect the outcome of events using this technology, of course, that's going to be super secret. And to this day, they wouldn't want to let anyone know that they have that ability.
I mean, if only we had a way to access any information in the whole of time and space, we could just find out what they'd been up to, couldn't we?
We have to tread lightly.
I mean, you guys have probably seen the same stuff as I have. Yuri Geller's come forward many times saying that they tried to get him to do those kind of subversive experiments and he rebelled against it. So we know from him that they were looking at it. And as I said, I found probably 6 documents that kind of hint at it, but they don't lead anywhere, because out of the 110,000 pages, there's like 6 pages. But one of the documents literally does list all the training techniques and where they should go to go with this, and then there's nothing, and I'm like, whoa. It's almost like they slipped through accidentally, and where is all this other information? And we do have, you can see that monies did go to certain agencies to look at remote action effects, but you don't really see, that's not really talked about. It's not discussed in any way within the Stargate remote viewing stuff or work.
So I think we're running out of time here. So just to bring things from the past up to the present, I wanted to ask you, Daz, about flow. What is it, and how is it not CRV?
Yeah, well, in the last couple of years, there have been lots of tribal debates over what is CRV and what isn't CRV. You know, there are some camps out there that say if you don't practice exactly what Ingo Swann taught in 1984, then you're not practicing controlled remote viewing or CRV. What I practice as CRV has changed over 24 years, because you can't have a stagnant kind of self-contained kind of mechanism that doesn't have change or doesn't expand or grow. So I ended up thinking, well, they can stay in their old-fashioned 1984 remote viewing system if they want, but what I'm going to promote and what I'm going to teach or mentor from now on is a new approach, a new philosophy towards CRV. It's still CRV at its core, but I've made changes which I felt that Ingo made mistakes on in the way he approached things. We're in a different world now. So yeah, flow is just a core of Ingo CRV, but with a new perspective on it, with my changes to it. I can't teach in the way Ingo taught the military guys, where it's all like Pavlov's dog type teaching of ringing a bell, making them salivate type thing. It's just not a good way to teach people. My approach is that every person I teach is an individual, and they have these individual traits that need to be honed. So that's all it is. It's CRV, but with a new philosophy and approach, which is a bit more individualistic towards each person.
Daz, where can people find you if they want to read more about your Hellfire work or what you're working on, or read any of your books? Where's the best place for people to just find you online and learn more about what you do?
Okay, I have my main website, which is remoteview.com. That's got a huge resource of everything on it that I can possibly find. And I have the 8 Martinis magazine, and that's a free remote viewing magazine. And to be honest, the next issue's got some old Ingo Swann stuff that's never been seen in public before, so a lot of people are going to find that interesting. It's lots of his actual live remote viewing at the pyramids, looking for the Atlantean Hall of Records for the Edward Casey Foundation. So that's an interesting one. And I also have, lots of videos from our Friday night chats on YouTube under remoteview.com. There's probably about 100 or so videos there now on that one.
Yeah, those are some great videos. You started that up during the COVID lockdowns, and there's some really great chats. Definitely go find Daz on his website and online. I think, Daz, thank you for, being a guest on our show. It was really fun talking about all sorts of wild and interesting remote viewing, esoteric topics. So really appreciate you showing up and having a conversation with us.
It's a great show. I'm a great listener to it. It gives me something to listen to on my photography walks. Yeah.
All right. Well, I think that's where we're going to wrap up the show. Thanks again, Daz. Signing out for myself, David, and Emily. We're the Cypher Podcast. We'll see you on the next episode. Take care, everybody.